Daniel Carter stood at the window of his small room and looked out at the alien city below. The buildings were tall and thin, made of dark stone that seemed to drink in the light from the 3 moons above. Strange music drifted up from the streets, and the air smelled like flowers he could not name. He had been living on this world for almost 2 years now. 2 years away from Earth. 2 years away from everything he had ever known. Sometimes it felt like a dream. Sometimes it felt like a prison. Daniel was not a soldier. He was not a spy. He was just a teacher. Back on Earth, he had taught history to high school students in a small town in Ohio. He had been good at it. He had loved watching young minds open up to the stories of the past. But then the Volanti had come, and everything had changed. The Volanti were the first aliens that humanity had ever met. Their ships had appeared in Earth's sky 5 years ago, huge and silent and beautiful. They had come in peace, they said. They wanted to welcome humanity into the galactic community. They wanted to share their knowledge and their culture. At first, everyone on Earth had been excited. Aliens were real. The universe was full of life. Humanity was no longer alone. But Daniel had learned quickly that the galaxy was not a friendly place. The Volanti were old. Their civilization had existed for 40,000 years. They had built empires and destroyed them. They had fought wars across 1,000 star systems. And they looked at humanity the way a grown man might look at a child playing in the dirt. Most of them. Anyway, Daniel had been chosen for this job because he was good with languages. He could learn new ways of speaking faster than anyone else in the program. Within 6 months, he could speak Volanti almost as well as a native. Within a year, he could read their ancient texts and understand their poetry. But the real reason he was valuable was something else. Daniel was good at reading people. He could watch a face and know what the person was thinking. He could watch a face and was thinking. He could listen to a voice and hear the lie hidden beneath the words. On Earth, this had made him a good teacher. Here, among the aliens, it made him useful in ways he had not expected. The Volanti were tall and thin, with skin like polished black stone and eyes that glowed a soft purple. They moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy. They spoke in voices like singing. And they believed, most of them, that they were better than every other species in the galaxy. Daniel had learned to ignore the insults. He had learned to smile when they called humans primitive. He had learned to bow when the nobles walked past. It was his job to build bridges between Earth and the Empire. He could not do that if he let his pride get in the way. His supervisor was a woman named Laura Bennett. She was 10 years older than Daniel, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. She ran the human embassy with a firm hand and a careful mind. She had warned Daniel on his first day that the Volanti court was dangerous. They smile and they bow and they speak beautiful words, she had said. But they are playing games that are older than our entire civilization. Be careful. Watch everything. Trust no one. Daniel had taken her advice to heart. He had spent 2 years watching. He had attended dinners and ceremonies and formal gatherings. He had stood in corners and listened to conversations. He had learned the names of all the noble houses and the history of their feuds. And slowly, piece by piece, he had built a picture of the forces that moved beneath the surface of the empire. There were 2 main factions in the court. The first was led by Queen Saletha herself. She was old even by Volanti standards, and she had ruled for nearly 1,000 years. She believed in peace. She believed in cooperation. She believed that the younger species of the galaxy, species like humanity, deserved a chance to grow and learn. The second faction was led by High Counselor Vethron. He was younger than the Queen and hungry for power. He believed that the Volanti were the chosen rulers of the galaxy. He believed that the younger species should be conquered and controlled. He believed that humanity, in particular, was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Daniel had watched Vethrin carefully. He had seen the way the counselor smiled at the queen while his eyes stayed cold. He had heard the whispers of the nobles who followed him. He knew that Vethrin was planning something. He just did not know what. Tonight, Daniel would find out that the Feast of Eternal Stars was the most sacred celebration in the Volanthi calendar. It happened once every 50 years, and it was a time when the entire empire came together to honor the ancient gods. No human had ever been invited to attend. The fact that Daniel had received an invitation was either a great honor or a terrible trap. Lavra thought it was a trap. The traditionalists have been too quiet, she had said that morning, pacing back and forth in her office. Vethrin has not made a move in months. That is not like him. He's planning something. You think something will happen at the feast? Daniel had asked. I think you need to be very, very careful, Lavra had replied. Watch everything. If anything seems wrong, get out. Do not try to be a hero. Just get out and come back here. Daniel had promised. But even as he spoke the words, he had felt a cold weight in his stomach. Something was going to happen tonight. He could feel it. He turned away from the window and looked at the formal robes that had been laid out for him. They were black and silver, cut in the Volanthi style. He would look strange in them, a human trying to dress like an alien. But it was expected. It was protocol. He picked up the robes and began to dress. The palace was an hour away by transport. As Daniel flew through the night sky, he watched the city lights pass beneath him. Millions of Volanthi lived in this city. Millions more lived on the other worlds of the empire. And all of them were gathered tonight, in spirit if not in body, to celebrate the Feast of Eternal Stars. Daniel wondered how many of them knew about Vethrin's plans. He wondered how many of them would cheer if humanity was destroyed. He pushed the thought away. He could not afford to think like that. He was here to build bridges, not to burn them. The palace appeared on the horizon, a mountain of crystal and stone that rose up into the sky like a frozen explosion. Lights blazed from every window. Music echoed across the night. Daniel felt his heart begin to beat faster. The transport landed in a courtyard filled with other vehicles. Daniel stepped out and joined the flow of nobles walking toward the great doors. He kept his head down and his eyes open. He listened to the conversations around him. He watched the faces of the people he passed, and he walked into the palace, ready for whatever the night would bring. The guards stepped back. The nobles fell silent. And Daniel Carter walked forward alone, across the vast empty space toward the throne of the Volanthi queen. His footsteps echoed in the silence. His heart beat like a drum. But he kept his head high and his eyes forward. He would not show fear. He could not afford to show fear. The queen watched him approach. Her face showed nothing. Her eyes glowed steady and bright. Behind her, High Counselor Vethrin stood frozen. His face was twisted with rage, but he did not move. He did not speak. He was waiting to see what would happen. Daniel stopped at the bottom of the steps that led to the throne. He bowed, low and formal, the way he had been taught. Then he straightened and looked up at the queen. "Speak," she said. "Explain yourself." "Your Majesty," Daniel began. His voice was calm, though his throat was dry. "I mean no disrespect to you or to your traditions. I know that what I have done is unforgivable. A human, interrupting the sacred feast. I know that I will be punished, but I could not stand by and watch you die." A murmur ran through the crowd. The word poison was whispered from lip to lip. "You claim the fruit is poisoned," the queen said. "How do you know this?" "I can see it," Daniel replied. "There is a substance on the surface. It is a color that is invisible to Volanthi eyes, but visible to human eyes. I do not know what the poison is. I do not know who put it there. I only know that it is there." Vethrin stepped forward then. His voice was cold and sharp. "This is absurd," he said. "This human is either mad or a liar. Perhaps he is the assassin himself, trying to create confusion. Your Majesty, give me permission to remove this creature from your presence." The Queen did not look at Vethron. She kept her eyes on Daniel. "You say your eyes can see what ours cannot," she said slowly. "This is possible. I have read the studies of human biology. Your species perceives colors differently than we do." "Yes, Your Majesty," Daniel said. "But it is also possible that you are lying. That you have come here to disrupt the feast, to insult our traditions, to cause harm to the Empire." "That is also possible," Daniel admitted. "I have no way to prove my words except one. Have the fruit tested. If I am wrong, then I am wrong, and I will accept whatever punishment you give me. But if I am right, then I have saved your life. That is all I ask. Test the fruit." The hall was silent again. Everyone was waiting. Everyone was watching. Vethron spoke again, his voice rising. "Your Majesty, this is a waste of time. The feast is sacred. The fruit is sacred. To test, it would be to doubt the gods themselves. I insist that you ignore this human and complete the ceremony." The Queen turned to look at Vethron. Her expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. "You insist," she repeated. "That is a strong word, Counselor." Vethron paused. He seemed to realize that he had made a mistake. "I meant only to advise Your Majesty. I am concerned for your safety and for the honor of the Empire." "And I am concerned for the truth," the Queen replied. She turned back to Daniel. "Very well. We will test the fruit." She raised her hand and made a gesture. A servant hurried away and returned moments later, carrying a small box made of blue crystal. Inside the box was a device that looked like a clear stone, smooth and round and glowing faintly. "The Truth Stone," the Queen explained. "It was made by our ancestors 10,000 years ago. It can detect any substance, any poison, any lie. If there is something wrong with the fruit, it will show us." She took the Truth Stone from the box and held it over the golden fruit. For a moment, nothing happened. The stone glowed blue, soft, and gentle. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. What if he was wrong? What if his eyes had tricked him? What if there was no poison? Then the stone began to change color. The blue faded. A new color appeared, deep and angry and red. The glow spread through the stone like blood through water, and a high, thin sound filled the air, like a scream of warning. The Queen pulled her hand back. She stared at the fruit, then at the stone, then at Daniel. "Poison," she whispered. The fruit was truly poisoned. Chaos erupted. Nobles screamed and pushed toward the doors. Guards ran forward, surrounding the Queen with their bodies. Servants dropped their trays and fled. The beautiful hall became a storm of noise and movement, but Daniel did not move. He stood at the bottom of the steps and watched the Queen's face. And he saw something there that surprised him. She was not afraid. She was angry. "Seize the servant," she commanded. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Seize everyone who touched that fruit. Seal the doors. No one leaves this hall." The guards obeyed. The doors slammed shut. The servant who had carried the fruit was grabbed and forced to his knees. He was shaking with terror. "I did not know," he cried. "I swear, Your Majesty, I did not know. I was given the fruit by my master. I was told to bring it to you. I did not know it was poisoned." "Your master," the Queen said. "And who is your master?" The servant's eyes moved. Just for a moment. Just a flicker. But Daniel saw where they looked. They looked at High Counselor Vethron. The Queen saw it too. She turned slowly, her silver robes flowing around her, and she faced the counselor. "Vethron," she said. Her voice was quiet now, quiet and cold. The servant belongs to your household." Vethren's face was pale, but his eyes were still hard. "This proves nothing. Any of my servants could have been bribed or blackmailed. I knew nothing of this plot." "Perhaps," the queen said, "and perhaps not. We will discover the truth soon enough." She turned back to Daniel. For a long moment, she studied his face. "You saved my life," she said. "A human. A member of a species that many of my people consider primitive. You saw what no one else could see. You spoke when no one else dared to speak." Why? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about all the insults he had suffered. He thought about all the times he had been told that humans were worthless. He thought about his home, far away across the stars, and all the people who were counting on him to build a bridge between their world and this one. "Because it was right," he said simply. "Because you were a good queen. Because you want peace. And because if you died, there would be war, and millions of people on both sides would suffer. I could not let that happen." The queen smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was real. "Perhaps," she said, "we have underestimated your species." Then Vethren moved. The grand hall was the largest room Daniel had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness. The walls were made of crystal that caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 colors. And rising from the floor like frozen trees were pillars of pure white stone, each one carved with the faces of ancient kings and queens. Daniel stood near the back of the hall, trying to make himself small. There were nearly 300 Volanthi nobles in the room, and he was the only human. He could feel their eyes on him. Some looked at him with curiosity. Some looked at him with disgust. Most did not look at him at all, as if he was not worth noticing. He did not mind. It was easier to watch when no one was watching him. The queen sat on her throne at the far end of the hall. She was beautiful in a way that was hard to describe. Her skin was darker than the others, almost blue in the light. Her eyes glowed brighter. Her silver robes flowed around her like water, and on her head she wore a crown of living crystal that shifted and changed with every movement. Daniel had spoken to her 3 times in 2 years. Each conversation had lasted only a few minutes, but in those minutes he had seen something in her that gave him hope. She was kind. She was wise. She truly wanted peace between her people and the rest of the galaxy. If she lived, there might be a future for humanity in this empire. If she died, there would be war. High Counselor Vethren stood beside the throne. He was tall even for a Volanthi, and his robes were dark red, the color of old blood. His face was handsome, but his eyes were cold. Daniel had learned to read Volanthi expressions, and everything about Vethren spoke of hunger. Hunger for power. Hunger for control. Hunger for the death of everything that stood in his way. The feast began with music. 100 musicians played instruments that Daniel could not name, filling the hall with sounds that were beautiful and strange. Then came the dancers, moving in patterns that told stories of ancient wars and forgotten loves. Then came the speeches, the long formal words of praise for the queen and the empire and the glory of the Volanthi people. Daniel listened to it all. He watched it all. And he waited. The food came next. Servants in white robes moved through the crowd, carrying trays of things that Daniel had never seen before. There were fruits and colors that did not exist on Earth. There were meats that smelled like honey and fire. There were drinks that glowed in the dark. Daniel took nothing. He was not here to eat. He was here to watch. The nobles ate and drank and laughed. They talked about politics and power and the latest scandals of the court. Daniel moved through the crowd, staying in the shadows, listening to pieces of conversation. He heard nothing useful, nothing that pointed to what Vethren was planning. But the feeling in his stomach grew stronger with every passing minute. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the air like the charge before a storm. He looked at Vethrin. The counselor was standing very still, his eyes fixed on the queen. His hands were clasped behind his back. His face showed nothing, but his shoulders were tense. His breathing was fast, and every few seconds his eyes would move to a door at the side of the hall, then back to the queen. Daniel followed his gaze. The door was small, almost hidden in the shadows. Two servants stood beside it, waiting. Waiting for what? The music stopped. The hall fell silent. A voice rang out, announcing the final ceremony of the feast. The Fruit of Stars. Daniel had heard of this ritual. Lavra had told him about it once. At the end of the Feast of Eternal Stars, the queen would eat a piece of sacred fruit. It was a symbol of her connection to the gods. It was said to give her visions of the future. Only the ruler could eat it. Only at this feast. The small door opened. A single servant walked out, carrying a tray of black crystal. On the tray sat a small fruit, round and golden, glowing with soft light. The servant walked slowly across the hall. Every eye in the room followed him. The silence was complete. Daniel watched. And then he saw it. The fruit was wrong. He did not know how he knew. He did not understand why. But something about the color was not right. There was a faint shadow on the surface, a discoloration that was almost invisible. It was not gold. It was something else. Something that his human eyes could see, but the Volanthi eyes could not. He remembered a lesson from his training. Volanthi could not see certain shades of color. Their eyes worked differently than human eyes. There were parts of the spectrum that were invisible to them. The poison, if that was what it was, had been hidden in a color that no Volanthi would ever notice. Daniel's heart stopped. Then it started again, beating so hard that he thought everyone in the hall must be able to hear it. The servant reached the throne. He knelt before the queen and held up the tray. The queen smiled. She reached out her hand. And Daniel knew that he had to move. He did not think about what would happen. He did not think about the guards or the nobles or the consequences. He only thought about the queen, about to eat poison, about to die. He stepped forward. The nobles around him turned to look. He pushed past them, moving toward the throne. Someone shouted. Someone grabbed at his arm, but he pulled away. He walked into the open space before the throne. The queen's hand was almost touching the fruit, and Daniel raised his voice and spoke. "Your Majesty, do not touch that food." The words echoed through the hall like thunder. The queen's hand froze. The servant holding the tray went pale, and every eye in the room turned to look at Daniel Carter, the human, who had just interrupted the most sacred ceremony in the Volanthi Empire. The silence was absolute. It pressed down on Daniel like a weight. He could feel his heart pounding. He could feel the sweat on his skin. He could feel 300 pairs of alien eyes staring at him, with shock and anger and confusion. But he did not look away from the queen. He stood straight, his hands at his sides, and he waited for her response. It came quickly. "What did you say?" the queen asked. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the calm. "The fruit has been poisoned," Daniel said. His voice was steady, though his legs were shaking. "There is something on the surface. My eyes can see it. Yours cannot. I am begging you, Your Majesty, do not eat it." A roar of anger rose from the crowd. Nobles shouted in outrage. Guards moved toward Daniel, their weapons drawn. But the queen raised one hand, and everyone fell silent. She looked at Daniel with those glowing purple eyes. She looked at him for a long, long time, and then she spoke. "Let him approach." Everything happened in a single heartbeat. Vethrin's hand moved to his robes. A blade appeared, long and thin and glowing with deadly light. He lunged toward the queen, his face twisted with hate, his arm raised to strike. The guards were too slow. They were facing the wrong way, watching the crowd, watching the doors. They did not see the danger until it was almost too late. But Daniel saw it. He did not think. He did not plan. His body simply moved. He threw himself forward, crashing into Vethran just as the blade came down. They fell together, rolling across the stone floor. Daniel grabbed Vethran's wrist and twisted, using all his strength to keep the blade away from his body. Vethran was strong, stronger than a human. His muscles were like iron, and his grip was crushing. Daniel felt the bones in his arm grinding together. He felt the blade inching closer to his throat, but he did not let go. He remembered his training. Back on Earth, before he came to this world, he had learned to fight. Not to win against stronger enemies, but to survive. To hold on. To buy time. He twisted his body, throwing his weight to the side. Vethran stumbled. The blade went wide. And then the guards were there, grabbing the counselor and pulling him away. Daniel lay on the cold stone floor, gasping for breath. His arm was burning with pain. His heart was pounding so hard that he thought it might burst. But he was a live dot, and so was the queen. He looked up and saw her standing above him. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright. "You saved me again," she said softly. "You could have died." Daniel tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He coughed and tried again. It seemed like the right thing to do. He managed. The queen laughed. It was a small sound, surprised and almost sad. "You humans," she said. "You are very strange." She held out her hand. Daniel took it, and she helped him to his feet. Her grip was gentle, but strong. Around them, the guards were binding Vethran in chains. The counselor was struggling and shouting, but he could not break free. His face was red with rage, and his eyes burned with hate. "This is not over," he screamed. "The Empire will fall. Humanity will burn. You cannot stop what is coming." The queen turned to face him. Her voice was calm and cold. "You have committed treason," she said. "You tried to kill your queen. You tried to destroy the peace that I have worked for 1,000 years to build. There is only one punishment for such crimes." She raised her hand. The guards stepped forward, ready to carry out her judgment. But before she could speak, Daniel stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said. "Wait." The queen turned to look at him. Her eyes were curious. "He should face a public trial," Daniel said. "The whole empire should see what he did. They should hear his confession. They should understand the truth of his conspiracy. If you execute him now, in secret, there will be rumors. There will be doubt. Some will say that you acted in anger, not justice." The queen studied him for a long moment. "You would show mercy to the man who tried to kill me?" she asked. "Not mercy," Daniel replied. "Justice. There is a difference." Vethran laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Listen to the human, Your Majesty," he mocked. "He wants to save me. How touching. How pathetic." "I do not want to save you," Daniel said, turning to face him. "I want to destroy you, but not with a blade. With the truth. I want everyone in this empire to know what you did. I want your name to become a word for traitor. I want children 1,000 years from now to learn about High Counselor Vethran, the fool who tried to kill his queen and failed because a human saw through his plan." Vethran's face went pale. He stopped, struggling. He stared at Daniel with something new in his eyes. Fear. The queen smiled. It was not a kind smile. "The human speaks wisely," she said. "Very well. There will be a trial. The whole empire will watch. And when the truth is known, justice will be done." She turned to her guards. "Take him to the prison. Put him in the deepest cell. Guard him well. He must live to face his judgment." The guards dragged Vethran away. His screams echoed through the hall as they disappeared through a hidden door. Then the queen turned back to Daniel. "You have done a great thing tonight," she said. "You have saved my life. You have exposed a traitor. You have changed the future of the empire." Daniel shook his head. "I did what anyone would do." "No," the queen replied. "You did what very few would do. You risked your life for someone who was not your own kind. You spoke truth when lies would have been easier. You showed courage when most would have shown fear." She paused, and her voice grew soft. "I have ruled for 1,000 years. I have seen many species come and go. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. And in all that time, I have met very few beings who were truly good." She reached out and touched Daniel's face. Her fingers were cool and smooth. "You are a good man, Daniel Carter. Your species is lucky to have you." Daniel did not know what to say. He felt tears in his eyes, though he did not know why. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he whispered. The queen nodded. Then she turned to face the hall. The nobles were still there, clustered near the walls, watching with wide eyes. The chaos had ended. The fear had faded. Now there was only silence and waiting. "My people," the queen said, her voice ringing through the hall. "Tonight, a great evil was attempted. And tonight, a great good was done. You have seen with your own eyes what happened here. Remember it well. Tell your children. Tell your grandchildren. Let the story of this night be passed down through the ages." She raised her hand and pointed at Daniel. "This human saved my life. He saw what we could not see. He spoke when we could not speak. He fought when we could not fight. And because of him, I stand before you now, alive and well." The hall was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, slowly, one noble stepped forward. He was old, with white hair and a lined face. He bowed low before Daniel. "Thank you," he said simply. Another noble stepped forward. And another. And another. One by one, they came, bowing before Daniel, speaking words of thanks. Daniel stood among them, overwhelmed. He had expected hatred. He had expected anger. He had never expected this. Perhaps, he thought, there was hope after all. The weeks that followed were like a storm. The trial of High Counselor Vethron was broadcast across the entire empire. Billions of Volanthi watched as he was brought before the Council of Justice. They watched as the evidence was presented. They watched as witness after witness came forward to tell what they knew. The conspiracy was bigger than anyone had imagined. Vethron had been planning his move for decades. He had gathered allies in secret. He had placed his servants in every corner of the palace. He had bribed officials and threatened nobles and killed anyone who stood in his way. And at the heart of his plan was a simple goal: kill the queen, blame humanity, and use the resulting anger to start a war. A war that would have destroyed Earth. The evidence was clear. The testimony was overwhelming. And in the end, Vethron himself confessed. He stood before the council and told them everything, his voice cold and proud. He was not ashamed of what he had done. He was only angry that he had failed. "Humanity is a disease," he said. "They spread through the galaxy like vermin. They breed and they build and they consume. In 1,000 years, they will be everywhere. In 10,000 years, they will rule. Unless we stop them now." He looked directly at the cameras, directly at the billions watching. "I tried to save you," he said. "I tried to save our people. And you stopped me. You will regret this. Your children will regret this. The empire will fall, and humanity will dance on our graves." The council found him guilty. The sentence was death. Daniel did not watch the execution. He had seen enough death. He had caused enough pain. He wanted only to go home, but home was not yet possible. The queen had other plans. She summoned Daniel to the palace 3 days after the trial ended. He went, wearing his formal robes, expecting a simple farewell. Instead, he found himself standing in the throne room, surrounded by the highest nobles of the empire. "Daniel Carter," the queen said, her voice ringing through the hall. "You came to our world as a stranger. You lived among us as a guest. And when danger came, you stood between me and death. You saved my life. You saved the peace between our peoples. You changed the future of the galaxy." She rose from her throne and walked down the steps toward him. "In our long history, we have honored many heroes. We have given titles to warriors and scholars and kings. But never before have we given such an honor to someone who was not born of our blood." She stopped in front of Daniel. Her eyes were bright. "I name you friend of the throne. From this day forward, you will always have a place in my court. You will always have my ear. You will always be welcome in the empire, now and forever." The hall erupted in applause. Nobles who had once looked at Daniel with disgust now bowed before him. Servants who had ignored him now rushed to serve him. The world had changed, and Daniel was at the center of it. He did not know how to feel. Later, when the ceremony was over, Lavra Bennett found him standing on a balcony overlooking the alien city. The 3 moons were rising, casting strange shadows across the towers and streets below. "Congratulations," she said, standing beside him. "Friend of the throne. That is quite a title. I did not ask for it," Daniel replied. "No, you never asked for anything. That is why they gave it to you." Daniel smiled, but the smile was tired. "I almost died," he said quietly. "I almost got everyone killed. If I had been wrong about the poison, if my eyes had tricked me, they would have executed me as a traitor. And Earth would have been blamed for ruining the sacred feast. But you are not wrong," Lara said. "Your eyes did not trick you. You saw the truth, and you spoke it, and you saved everyone. I was lucky. Maybe. Or maybe you were brave. Maybe you were good. Maybe you were exactly what this moment needed." She put her hand on his shoulder. "You know what this means, do you not? For Earth, for humanity. You proved something tonight. You showed them that we are not just primitive creatures stumbling through the stars. We are people. We have value. We have worth." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood. "The other species in the galaxy will hear about this," Lavra continued. "They will hear how a human saved the Volanthi Queen. They will hear how one man stood against a conspiracy and won. They will start to see us differently. Not as children. Not as animals. As equals." "That is a lot of weight to put on one night," Daniel said. "It is. But you can carry it. You have already proven that." They stood in silence for a long time, watching the moons rise higher in the sky. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Do you think it will last? The peace, I mean. The friendship between our peoples." Lavra thought about the question. "I do not know," she admitted. "The universe is big and old and full of danger. There will always be people like Vethran. People who hate and fear and want to destroy. There will always be wars and conflicts and misunderstandings." She paused. "But there will also be people like you. People who see the truth and speak it. People who risk their lives for strangers. People who believe that peace is worth fighting for." She smiled. "As long as there are people like that, there is hope." Daniel looked out at the alien city, at the towers of dark stone and the lights that burned in 1,000 windows. He thought about Earth, far away across the stars. He thought about his students, the children he had taught so long ago. He wondered what they would think if they could see him now. He thought about the future, thought it would not be easy. The galaxy was full of challenges, full of species who did not trust each other, full of old wounds and older fears. Building a better future would take time and patience and courage, but it could be done. Humans were good at impossible things. They had climbed out of caves and learned to fly. They had split the atom and walked on the moon. They had built ships that sailed between the stars, and now they had proven something else. They had proven that they belonged here among the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. They had proven that they had something to offer. Not weapons, not technology, but something simpler and more powerful. Daniel Carter turned away from the balcony and walked back into the palace. There was work to be done. There was a future to build. There was a bridge to finish. And he was ready.